What would you even do with a real inheritance? My son sneered. Dad knew you never created any value. That night, my 60th birthday, I lit a single candle, stuck in a piece of stale bread. My husband once said, "True worth hides in the ashes of what was lost." My son thought he'd buried me. He had no idea that from those ashes I was about to rebuild an empire. It began a month ago, in a room of cold glass, and even colder words. The lawyer's pen made a sharp, metallic sound on the table. I heard my son's name, Ethan, the penthouse, the stocks, the company David built from nothing. Then I heard mine, Evelyn. A single key, a penthouse for him, a key for me. Ethan signed the papers, his father's platinum watch glinting under the light, his hand cutting across the page, severing 35 years of my life. Just like that. I looked up at David's portrait, his kind smile twisting into a stranger's cruel joke. Was this really his final message to me? The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the city air outside. We had returned from the lawyer's office less than an hour ago, the same space where David and I had hosted countless dinners, where the echo of laughter was still trapped in the high ceilings, now felt like a pristine, hollow museum, a monument to a life that was no longer mine. Ethan walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Central Park as if he were seeing his kingdom for the first time. He loosened his tie, poured a drink. The amber liquid swirled in the crystal glass, the ice cubes clinking softly. He never offered me one. I felt like a ghost in my own home. My feet made no sound on the Persian rugs David and I had picked out in Istanbul. I ran my hand over a bronze sculpture on the mantel, its cool, familiar surface a stark contrast to the coldness that had settled deep in my bones. I had to understand. I needed to hear it from him, not from a man in a suit reading from a piece of paper. Ethan. He didn't turn. He just took a slow sip of his whiskey, his reflection a dark silhouette against the glittering skyline of Manhattan. Ethan, we need to talk about what happened. He finally turned, his face unreadable. The grief he had worn for the funeral was gone, replaced by a chillingly calm sense of ownership. "There's nothing to talk about, Mother," he said, his voice smooth, rehearsed. The will was perfectly clear. He adjusted the platinum watch on his wrist, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. But this wasn't nervousness. It was impatience. That watch, a graduation gift from David, was meant to mark time. Now it seemed to be counting down the seconds I had left in my own home. He judged my life in a sentence. I watched him. This man who was once the small boy who held my hand crossing the street, the boy who cried when he scraped his knee, who I had held and comforted and told that everything would be all right. Where did that boy go? When did his heart become as hard and polished as the marble beneath his expensive Italian shoes? He was a stranger wearing my son's face, and he was looking at me as if I were a piece of old furniture that no longer fit the decor. "Where am I supposed to go, Ethan?" The question was quiet, barely a whisper, but it hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile. He finished his drink in one swallow, placing the empty glass on the table with a decisive click. That was my answer. He walked towards the foyer, and I saw it then. My suitcase, a large leather suitcase David had bought me for our anniversary trip to Paris. It was standing by the front door, already packed. He had planned this. While I was numb with shock in that office, he was already erasing me. He didn't just inherit a home, he erased mine. "What would you even do with a real inheritance?" he asked, the words sharp, precise, meant to cut. He finally looked at me, his eyes cold and clear. "Dad knew you never created any value." I stood. I watched. I said nothing. My silence was the only thing I had left that was truly my own. He mistook it for weakness. He would learn, in time, that the most dangerous storms are the ones that gather in silence. He opened the door, the city noise flooding the quiet hallway for a brief moment. He didn't touch the suitcase. He just nodded at it, a final dismissive gesture. He walked out, turned back, closed the door. The lock clicked into place, a sound as final as a nail in a coffin. The sound echoed down the long, empty hallway, bouncing off the walls that held 35 years of my memories. For a moment, there was nothing, just the low hum of the city far below. Silence had never been so loud. My son was gone, and I was alone. The taxi ride from the Upper East Side to Brooklyn was a journey through descending worlds. I watched the reflection of the woman in the window, a pale ghost against the glittering backdrop of a city she no longer belonged to. The familiar glow of Manhattan's towers blurred into the stark, industrial skeletons of the bridges, each one a crossing into a deeper level of exile. The driver didn't speak. He just followed the address on the slip of paper, his silence a paid courtesy. We left the avenues of wealth and arrived on a street of brick, rust, and rain-slicked pavement. He pulled over, dropped my bag on the curb, drove away without a word. The key felt cold and alien in my hand. It took 3 tries before the rusty lock on the heavy steel door groaned in protest and finally gave way. I entered. I dropped my bag. I stood. The air inside was thick, a forgotten language of turpentine, linseed oil, and decades of settled dust. It was the smell of David's beginnings, before the galleries, before the penthouse, before the success that had ultimately erased me. Shrouded canvases stood around the room like hunched figures in the gloom, their secrets hidden under stained white sheets. An old, splintered armchair sat in the center of the room, a lonely island in a sea of decay. I ran my fingers across an old, flat file cabinet, the wood warped and dry. I pulled on a drawer handle. Locked. I looked at the key in my hand, the one from the lawyer. It didn't fit. Of course it didn't. Another door I wasn't meant to open. My life had become 4 walls of dust. The sky outside broke open then, the rain coming down in hard, relentless sheets. It drummed against the skylight, a hollow, lonely rhythm. Soon a new sound joined the chorus, a slow, steady drip from a crack in the ceiling, each drop hitting a metal bucket left on the floor. Drip, drip, drip. The studio was weeping for me, or perhaps with me. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. A sudden hunger pang reminded me that I hadn't eaten since morning. In my purse, tucked away in a side pocket, I found it. A small loaf of bread I'd bought 2 days ago, now stale and hard. And at the bottom of the bag, a single bent birthday candle from a celebration years ago. Today was my 60th birthday. I pushed the small candle into the dry bread. I found a book of matches on a dusty shelf. I struck one, watched it flare, lit the wick. The tiny flame flickered to life, a fragile warmth against the oppressive cold. It cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, making the shrouded canvases seem to move, to breathe. I held my pathetic cake and stared into that single point of light, the only light that was mine in the whole world. And the composure I had held onto so tightly in that lawyer's office, in that empty hallway, it finally broke. A single tear escaped, then another. They traced paths through the dust on my cheeks. This was the inheritance of a worthless woman. I had lost my husband. I had lost my home. I had lost the son I had poured my entire life into. There was nothing left, just the sound of the rain, the dripping water, and the flickering light of a single, lonely flame. As I sat there, hollowed out and empty, a memory surfaced, clear and sharp. David's voice from a lifetime ago as we stood in this very studio, his hands covered in paint, his eyes full of dreams. If you're ever left with only ashes, Evelyn, find the place where I began. I must have fallen asleep in the armchair, the dried tear tracks cold on my skin. I woke not to the sound of rain, but to an almost holy silence. The storm had passed. Through the grimy skylight, a single blade of sunlight cut through the dusty air, illuminating the space with a pale morning glow. It was beautiful, in a broken sort of way. David's words from the night before were no longer a ghostly echo. They felt like an instruction. Find the place where I began. This studio. This was the place. These were the ashes. My body ached as I pushed myself out of the chair. For the first time, I looked at the shrouded canvases not as tombstones of a failed past, but as unanswered questions. My feet carried me to the largest one, standing alone in the corner. My hand hesitated for a moment, then gripped the rough, dusty edge of the tarp. I stood. I breathed. I pulled. The heavy canvas slid to the floor with a soft whoosh, releasing a cloud of dust that danced in the sunbeam, and I froze. It wasn't a forgotten student piece or a failed experiment. It was a masterpiece, a storm of deep blues and furious grays, a chaotic sea of emotion with a single defiant slash of brilliant yellow at its heart. It was breathtaking. It was alive. It felt like my own grief, captured in oil and pigment. I reached out, my fingers tracing the thick, textured brushstrokes. David had painted this, but I had never seen it before. Why would he hide something so beautiful? Driven by a sudden, frantic energy, I moved to the next canvas and the next. One by one, I unveiled them. A portrait of a woman whose face was hidden in shadow, but whose hands told a story of resilience. A stark, minimalist cityscape of a Brooklyn that no longer existed. Each one was a fully realized work, crackling with a power and a vision I hadn't seen in David's commercial work for decades. On the back of a small, intimate still life of 2 empty coffee cups, I saw it. Carved into the wooden stretcher bar, the letters small and certain, for E.C. for Evelyn Campbell, for me. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just forgotten art. This was a message, a story. My legs felt weak, and I stumbled towards David's old work desk, searching for an answer, for anything. The surface was coated in a fine layer of dust, disturbed only by my own handprints from the night before. In the top drawer, beneath a pile of dried-up paint tubes, I found it. A leather-bound journal I had given him on our 10th anniversary. It felt warm in my hands, familiar. I opened it. His elegant, slanted handwriting filled the first page. Tucked between the pages, something small and cold fell into my palm. A small, ornate brass key. I knew instantly. It was not the key to this studio. It was the key to something inside it. My eyes darted to the locked flat file cabinet across the room, but my attention was pulled back to the page, to his words, to the truth. "My dearest Evelyn," the letter began. My voiceover reads his words, filled with a love I thought I had lost. "If you are reading this, then the worst has happened. I know what the will says. I know the pain it must have caused you. Please forgive me. I knew Ethan wouldn't be strong enough to resist his greed, and I couldn't bear the thought of him controlling you, of him slowly bleeding you dry while calling it management. So I left him the money, the penthouse, the empty symbols he values so much, and I left you the real inheritance. This studio, this place where it all began, is where I kept our true fortune. A collection of works I painted and acquired in secret over 30 years. I saved them for the one person I trusted most in this world. You. I sank to the floor, the letter clutched in my hand, the small brass key digging into my palm. The tears came again, but these were different. They weren't tears of sorrow or despair. They were tears of overwhelming relief, of gratitude, of a love so profound, so strategic, it had reached across death itself to protect me. He didn't abandon me. He armed me. The will wasn't a betrayal. It was a strategy. The studio wasn't a prison. It was a fortress. Grief is a fog, but clarity is a weapon. In the weeks that followed my discovery, I learned to wield it. My first move was not made in anger, but with the cold precision of a surgeon. David had left me a fortress, and now it was time to build an army. That army began with a single soldier, Mr. Harris, David's oldest and most trusted friend, a man whose reputation in the art world was as solid as the marble floors of the museums he curated. I met him not in a sterile office, but in the studio, surrounded by David's silent masterpieces. He walked among the canvases, his hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of professional calm. But I saw the flicker of profound sorrow in his eyes. He stopped in front of the painting with the defiant slash of yellow. David called this one the Unsilenced. He said softly, he always believed true beauty could not be muted forever. He then looked at me, a silent question in his gaze. I need to sell one, I told him, discreetly. He simply nodded. David told me, if Evelyn ever comes to you, it means the game has begun. He left instructions. The auction was private, exclusive, attended only by collectors who valued silence as much as they valued art. I wasn't there. I watched from a laptop in my small temporary room in Brooklyn as the Unsilenced went up for sale. The bidding was a quiet, tense battle of raised fingers and subtle nods. The final rap of the auctioneer's gavel felt less like a sale and more like the first shot fired in a war no one else knew had started. He was building an empire of noise. I was building a fortress of silence. The money was a means, not an end. It secured a sunlit loft in Greenwich Village, a place to breathe. It funded the quiet acquisition of a small, elegant gallery space on a cobblestone street under a new name. My name, E. Hartman. A ghost, a fiction, a shield. While the society pages buzzed with photos of Ethan on his new yacht, his arm around a new starlet, his face flushed with champagne and easy victory, I was on my knees, covered in dust, meticulously restoring a warped frame. He was making headlines. I was making plans. One evening, with the city humming below my window, I finally used the small brass key. It slid into the lock of the old flat file cabinet with a satisfying click. The drawer slid open, revealing not more paintings, but David's soul on paper, meticulously kept ledgers, documenting every acquisition, every sale, every thought. But underneath them was his private journal. I ran my hand over the worn leather cover. I opened to a random page. His handwriting filled the paper. Ethan sees art as an asset to be flipped, he wrote, a number on a balance sheet. He never understood. A painting is a record of a soul. Its true value can never be liquidated. That is its power and its danger. This was more than a weapon. It was a map to my son's blindness, my new life as E. Hartman took shape. The gallery opened quietly. It became a sanctuary for art lovers, a place where whispers of a mysterious new collector with an impeccable eye began to circulate. The anonymity was my armor, but armor can be tested. One afternoon, a reporter with sharp eyes and a shark smile came into the gallery. He feigned interest in a painting before leaning in close. "People are talking," he said, his voice a low, conspiratorial hum. "They say E. Hartman has a collection that rivals David Campbell's. Some even say she is his forgotten wife." I met his gaze. I held it. I smiled. "Sometimes," I replied, my voice even, "hiding is the only way to protect what's real." He left with nothing, but I knew my time as a ghost was limited. The ripples were spreading, and I knew they would eventually reach Ethan. The final piece fell into place a month later. I was in my loft, the city lights twinkling like fallen stars, when a business news alert flashed across the television. Ethan's latest high-risk tech venture had collapsed, taking a significant portion of his inheritance with it. And then he was on the screen, live. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes were haunted, cornered. He was losing. He knew it. And he did what all cornered animals do. He lashed out. "This is a coordinated attack," He spat, his voice tight with fury. "There is a new anonymous player in the art market, this E. Hartman, who is manipulating my father's legacy, driving down asset values. This is financial sabotage, and I will not stand for it." I leaned forward, my reflection a pale shadow on the dark screen. He was attacking a ghost, a name on a brass plaque. He was publicly declaring war on his own mother, and he had no idea. He had taken the bait, and I had the proof. The small silver chime above the gallery door was the only warning I received. 6 months. It had been 6 months since I'd seen my son's face on television, spitting venom at a shadow he couldn't comprehend. Now, that shadow had a body. He stood in the doorway, framed by the soft afternoon light, a ghost of the man he once was. His suit, once a symbol of his power, now hung on him like a costume for a part he had forgotten how to play. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow, hunted look of a man who had run out of road. He looked past me, his eyes scanning the priceless art on the walls, not with appreciation, but with the desperate calculation of a drowning man searching for a life raft. His gaze finally met mine. It was devoid of the cold fire I remembered. All that was left were embers. "Mom," he breathed, the word cracking. "I've lost everything." The stocks collapsed. They're suing me from every direction. The Penthouse. They're going to take the Penthouse. He took a shaky step forward. "I have nothing left." "I need your help." The world saw a failed tycoon. I saw a lost little boy who had broken all his favorite toys. I felt a pang of an old familiar ache, the instinct to run to him, to hold him, to fix it. But David's letter was a shield around my heart. The woman who would have crumbled was gone, buried in the ashes of that Brooklyn studio. The woman who stood here now. She brewed tea. "Sit down, Ethan." My voice was calm even. It surprised him. He expected tears or anger or a bitter, "I told you so." He didn't expect civility. I measured the leaves. I poured the water. I waited. The simple ritual was an anchor in the storm of his collapse. I placed the steaming cup before him. His hands trembled as he reached for it. "I will help you, but not with money." He took a sip, the warmth seeming to give him a sliver of his old confidence. "It was her," he said, his voice gaining a venomous edge. "This E. Hartman. She came out of nowhere, a ghost with a fortune. She manipulated the market, devalued Dad's legacy. She sabotaged me." He was confessing his failure to the very person he was accusing. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I let him talk. I let him spin his narrative of victimhood, of unfairness, of betrayal. I let him dig his own grave with the shovel of his own pride. When he finally fell silent, exhausted from his own excuses, I spoke. "That's a beautiful watch, Ethan," I said, my voice soft. He looked down at his wrist, confused by the sudden change of subject. He touched the platinum band instinctively. It's the last thing I have of him." "Of Dad?" "Not quite," I replied. I stood, walked to the small mahogany desk in the corner, and retrieved David's leather-bound journal. I opened it to a page marked with a silk ribbon and placed it on the table between us. It was a ledger entry, dated 10 years ago, clear, precise, undeniable. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning the page. He saw the name of a renowned art dealer. He saw a wire transfer for a significant sum, and he saw the description of the collateral used to secure the seed money for that purchase. He saw the serial number of his watch. Dad's passion was art, not stocks, I explained, my voice steady. The Penthouse was his success, but the studio was his heart. That collection, it was his real life's work. He needed capital to start it, capital he didn't want on the company books. Ethan looked from the ledger to my face and back again. The color drained from his cheeks as understanding dawned. He was connecting the dots. The worthless studio, the mysterious E. Hartman, the watch on his wrist. "He didn't give you that watch as a gift, Ethan." He gave it to you as a placeholder, I continued. Its value was never yours to spend. It was the seed, the first stone in the foundation of the fortress he was building for me. He stared at me, speechless. The man who had judged my entire life's worth in a single cruel sentence now had no words. He had built his empire on a lie he didn't even know he was living. He thought he was the heir to the throne, but he was just wearing a borrowed crown. I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to a quiet, final whisper. "The legacy you wear on your wrist," I said, holding his gaze, "was never yours to begin with." He didn't leave the gallery that day. He just sat there, in the silence, long after the tea in his cup had gone cold. The platinum watch on his wrist, once a symbol of his status, now seemed to be a manacle, chaining him to the ghost of a life he never truly owned. I watched the fight go out of his eyes, replaced by something I hadn't seen since he was a child, a raw, terrifying vulnerability. He looked up at me, his voice a hoarse whisper. "What do I do now?" I had waited 6 months to hear that question, not a demand, not a negotiation, but a genuine plea for direction. "You start over," I said. "I told you I would help. There is a job for you here. You'll sweep the floors. You will learn to crate and uncrate paintings that are worth more than the car you used to drive. You will earn your keep, and you will learn the value of $1 earned through the ache in your own back." He flinched. The son I knew would have stormed out, his pride wounded, but the man sitting before me just gave a slow, tired nod. He stayed. He swept. He learned. The first few weeks were a quiet, painful dance. I would watch him from my office, this former Prince of Wall Street, awkwardly pushing a broom, his movements clumsy and foreign. His soft hands, once used to signing multi-million-dollar deals, became calloused from handling wooden crates and hanging heavy frames. There were days I saw the frustration flicker in his eyes, the ghost of his old arrogance. But he never quit. He would just clench his jaw, take a breath, and continue. He was slowly chipping away at the marble statue he had become, searching for the man underneath. Time passed. Seasons changed outside the gallery window. One afternoon I saw him standing alone in front of The Unsilenced, his father's painting. He wasn't looking at it like an asset. He was just looking. His head was tilted, his expression one of quiet contemplation. For the first time, I think he truly saw it. He saw the fury, the hope, the defiant slash of yellow. He saw his father. We had to lose a fortune to find our wealth. Tonight the gallery is no longer quiet. It's filled with the warm buzz of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft glow of track lighting on canvas. It's the opening night of our most ambitious exhibition yet. Ethan moves through the crowd, no longer the center of attention, but a quiet, confident part of the whole. He speaks to guests not with the slick tongue of a salesman, but with a genuine knowledge, a love for the art that he earned with his own 2 hands. Late in the evening, we find ourselves standing together in front of the exhibition's centerpiece, a magnificent, abstract piece full of vibrant color, of chaos and harmony, of shadow and light. The title on the small brass plaque reads simply, Rebirth, and beneath it the artist's signature is not one name, but 3, David, Evelyn, and Ethan Campbell. I look at my son, and I see the reflection of his father in his eyes, finally clear of the fog of greed. He has found his way back, not to the penthouse, but to us. I feel David's presence in the warmth of the room, in the beauty on the walls, in the quiet strength of the son we raised together. He had built a fortress to protect me, but in the end it was a home big enough to save us all. True inheritance isn't given, it's rebuilt from the ashes. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this piece of my story. Family is a complicated journey for all of us, and I would be truly honored to read about your own experiences in the comments if you feel comfortable sharing. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, please subscribe so we can stay connected.